everyone, welcome back to The Oath. I hope that you are enjoying your day and that you've had a great week so far. I hope that you are enjoying the story and let me know who you think is behind the crime. Before you listen to this, I want to put out a warning caution that this episode does have sound effects, so if you are the type to get easily scared by sounds, please have your volume down low. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
오늘의 날씨 일기예보는 맑음 햇살 밝은 오후 무작정 어딘가 향하는 발걸음 너와 자주 걷던 거리 어쩌면 너무 익숙해져 버린 습관과 같던 매일 너랑 기억에 갇혀 살아
Dee, I couldn't believe I was here, kissing Ya like I'd always dreamed I would. There were times I wished I hadn't taken that oath because everything would prevent me from being this woman. The many men who came through my life were just pieces of him, and no one ever measured up to him. I wanted him for myself. I knew that a big part of him drew up the oath so that he could protect me, but no one needed to know that part. When would May go to bed so I could give Ya the embrace I'd longed all day to give him? When would the house go quiet so I could return to his arms the way it should be? As I thought that, May got up and walked to the bedroom we shared, and I let out a breath of relief. Ya immediately reached over and took my hands in his, kissing the knuckles. Then his hand fell lower to the opening of my skirt, and I slapped it away. I gave him a warning look, and I softly whispered a good night. A smile appeared on his handsome face as I stood up. "Bujongkona," he said loudly so he could be heard. I blew him a kiss as he embraced me, branding me with his scent. I tiptoed to the bedroom and slipped in under the covers. I could hear May moving beside me. "Dee," she said in the dark as she snuggled beside me. I ignored her. I heard her turn over, and then I began to breathe deep as if falling asleep. I waited until she listened to me, and when she went quiet, I slipped out from under the covers and opened the door to find Ya waiting for me. I took his hand and led him outside to where the night sky was welcoming us with the dark overcast. There, his lips found mine as the hunger exploded between us. He whispered against my lips. "Sadadama," I replied back as I smiled when his hands began tugging on the opening of my shirt. The massive explosion of pleasures spread throughout my body, and we fell to the ground, me beneath him, as he removed his shirt and I began to unbuckle his pants. I ran my hands down his strong, muscular back as he placed kisses by my neck. May cried. I shrieked and scrambled to look up as May came running down the hill to where we lay. Ya let out a muffled grunt as he pushed himself up from me and tried to shield my half-naked body with his. Ya cried as he covered me with his shirt. He buttoned his pants quickly. I stood up and pulled the shirt around myself. Dia, I dropped my jaw open, surprised by her outburst. It sounded almost like a jealous lover. And then she blurted out. Vì của nhà gia là đâu xong là của thế chứ của tôi khen về bé một cái cho luôn á. Giờ của bảo hai tiền nấy xuống bảo lên nó chè của tôi chỉ còn trên nó nấy cho luôn liao. Hai ta ô chỉ tao. I watched her with inquisitive eyes, and I never imagined that it would become this way. Since when did May begin to fancy Ya? Was this why she was so hesitant on pricking her own blood for the oath? Was this why she relied on the oath to keep me away from him? Ya walked forward to her. May, cái sao tụi xía thì cái sao kỹ, cô thọ gì, có hại yêu lợ, đó là ý sư hùa cô yêu kế lợ tia. Cơn nhà đi lọ, đi tới chẳng có sư nà. Nếu lối kế cho tụi xin nàng tới tàu thanh thọ, ô chả có chỉ một có mơ bảo cô nọ. I laughed. Đâu à, đã tốt cho bà đá lì cái lỡ tiêu nhẹ cả nà. Cậu mong mong cả thì cô tưởng là những cái thứ bao nhiêu thì lấy mua ya thì ra à. Chỉ đi kế cái nhà lý này hao xả chỉ mất hình chia. The woman was crazy if she thought she could outshine me. Everything I was, she never could be. Ya turned to me. Chủ mà đi, sao hai luôn đâu? She began to cry and nodded her head in understanding. Mong cái cơ ya, con ạ. Cơn trái kia được số tụi tôi có chứng mất tại là hai lũ có thế lọ. And that was the last straw as I saw red, and I rushed toward her, my fingernails scratching her as much as I could. I wanted to kill her as I managed to wrap my hands around her throat. I felt Ya pick me up, and as he pulled me away, May managed to slap me across the face. As I was pulled free, Jay came running outside with a shocked look on his face. What did you know? He asked in confusion. May turned to him and shoved at her cheeks. Jay, ít đâu đã lót chóc lợ. Ngờ làm thơ ít cho lũ hào đây ta sứ. Ngờ chẳng xít đánh cho linh con đâu. I remained quiet as she turned and walked up the hill. Cô một trẻ lợ. Cô nhớ chị tao đã kén nâng lìa lý nè. Jay watched the two of us with accusing eyes, and then he planted his hands on his hips. Ôi chà nê khi số lô à. Bây tư cho lũ ta lợ nè. Nê quả đã chú lý nó. Before I could answer, he turned and walked toward the house. I was about to follow when Ya grabbed my hand and turned me around. Galia, go killer, take a sim ji chop a malita. I ran a hand through my hair. Jay mo menda, ku sachi sa tia ni yo nye nye kono. Kay ku sha, ku pata uli kya do ne. Ya laughed and shook his head. Go chin chin ku lo. Yo kyan ching tao na, nữ tư wa chu li ko te nữ tư tao wa kê lo ne. Ya, ku hai đứa có báo tia. Nữ tư ku báo tia có đa ku na kê có yếm ma kê na. Smiling, he walked to me and brushed a strand of my hair back away from my face. The look he gave me was anything but sincere, and I felt a hole ripping through my heart. Dee, so ya ku ono, ku o ka ku sa ken ki plasa. Bu ya ka sa tia, ku te ka, yi mo no shi sha lo ning na lo. Ko po nya ka pe ke lu cha chia. U zou de rong li na ta lo lo, chi mo nu ku yo ka liao. Tears burned my eyes as he smiled at me and walked around me back to the house. I stood there, appalled and angered that I let him into my life and into the most intimate parts of me. How could I be so stupid? How could I not see his intention? Dee, you are so stupid. I shoved in my cheeks and walked back to the house. It was quiet and dark as I closed the door. I didn't have the face to sleep with May tonight, so I walked the stairs to the upper level and slept in the room Ty was supposed to be in. I cried into the pillow and muffled it with my fist. I was such an incredibly stupid girl to believe that Ya would give up the oath for me. Why didn't I see that? Ya. God damn it. God damn it to hell and back. Everything blew up, and not the way I wanted. One moment, I had Dee wiggling in pleasure beneath me, and the next, I had to tell her to stay away from me. It was the only way to save her from being crushed by May's jealousy. And how did I not see that May was in love with me? What did I get myself into? I couldn't even sleep on the same bed as Jay and slept on the ground all night long. When I woke the next morning, Jay was already up, staring at me with a blank look. I felt my cheeks blush, and embarrassment spread throughout myself. Thao, cô sa chỉ sao tia có yêu tao li nó. Ye vì đi cha có tứ do tụ tao lúc gì, ở cha có chuyện tụ số thua thế à? Jay asked me with a quiet voice. But before I could answer him, the front door opened, and we heard Ty's voice calling out to us. The two of us rushed out of the room and found Dee sitting on the couch alone with a cup of tea. She looked as if she hadn't slept a wink, and Ty dropped off the supplies on the kitchen counter. Shut up, Bujongtia, he asked as he smiled at us. Dee forced a smile and replied, Bujongka. Mene, Nishito he asked. Kumali Muchano. Dee set her cup down and walked around us to open the door where May slept and let out a blood-curdling scream. The three of us turned and ran to find May on the floor with her throat slit, lying in a pool of blood with her eyes wide opened. Tai forced his way in and grabbed Dee's hands, yanking her out of the room as Ge looked at me with accusation. Go. Go, he accused. I frowned. He pushed me against the door and punched me. Anger filled me as I shoved at him. Tai came to us and pulled us out of the room, closing the door. Come on, we followed him to the living room where Dee sat with shaking hands. This came from Ge. The silence fell after that question, and I had no answer. I looked over to where Dee sat, and I wondered what was going through her mind. The color to her face was pale, and I felt bad for her. I walked over and sat next to her, taking her hand. Hey, Sunshine. Gunyono, I whispered. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Cô chỉ tao ở nhà nó nữa, dạ. Cô trả lời tên nam mạo của là bố trong sự. Cũng chừng có. Ta chỉ cũng chừng chừng nè, Ge yelled. Nè ở tụi con à, ít tụi những bảo giả là chịu chịu khai sự. Tai turned to him and frowned. Giờ nè một tấm một đã chỉ thế à? Giờ tôi bị bảo sự phong như, I said as I stood up. Ta chỉ nè tôi nhóc của lúc trẻ nè. Chả nè một tấm một lỡ, nè yêu chịu khai khả trông được cô. I exchanged looks with Dee, who nodded her head slowly. So I told Tai the entire story from our oath to what happened last night with May discovering me and Dee together. Tai whistled and shook his head. Wow. You guys are messed up. And then he turned to Dee. May mua. She sobbed and covered her face with her hands. And then Tai came to me and shoved at me. I couldn't look anywhere but my feet. When the police arrived, the crime scene team took over and carried out May's body, then took the time to talk to us alone for the next 6 hours. I said what I knew, and when they finally left that evening, Tai let out a depleted breath. Johnny no lại kể tới rồi cô có nên chắc á một tấm bằng Johnny no kể bé sĩ thản đó mấy年mấy chỉ cho cô chỉ bảo hai tia sẽ nằm mòn nè ôn cái tia ta chỉ ta chỉ no lại kể cô lúc chỉ cả cho nên nhau cô lúc chơi ta kỳ sơn gió thằng này chắc á một chơi. I stood up and nodded. Oli ở phong như thằng chỉ tôi chỉ tấm bằng đó có vào cái chơi nè mà nó cô cho một họ rõ lo vì thế ta kỳ cô một họ lử nên nhau này cái thằng này chỉ sao chỉ tấm bằng gì lắm mà. He gave us a smile and left as I turned around to face Dee and Ge, whose faces were pale with no emotions. Be you had a gato mania te metzino? Ge asked. Everyone fell silent, and then Dee quietly left to the room she shared with May and shut the door. Ge looked at his feet for a moment, and then he stood up. Cũng chẳng chỉ tàu để các đa của lo tham bảo lên đó. Cũng mất xả lọ trong chỗ lý các đa của các tàu non tàu, họ có cục bông cá. Thì chế ra cái phụ như cứ tí xí lúc là xấu lên nó. I had no words to say as he walked to the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the couch and rubbed my eyes, my brain hurting from everything that had happened. I let out a deep breath and leaned my head back, feeling the tension in my shoulders tightening. What was I going to do? This was a huge mistake on my part, and I had let my emotions beat me to doing things I shouldn't have. A sound in the corner of the room stirred me enough for me to open my eyes and look around. The room was quiet, and I was alone. I stood up and watched the curtains that led to the outside, my eyes focusing on the color of the fabric, and then very slightly, a pair of dark hands shoved the curtains aside. I jumped up and began to rub my eyes. The curtains remained still as I let out a breath that made my heart beat faster. Slowly, I walked over to extend my hand to touch it, feeling the fabric between my fingers. Then I heard the sound of the fridge door opening behind me and what sounded like something falling out. Turning around, I saw an apple rolling toward my feet, and it landed right before me. As I bent down to pick it up, a black hand reached out from behind my legs and snatched it away. And then I heard the giggle that came from behind me. Turning around, I shoved the curtains aside and saw nothing but the darkness outside. And suddenly, my hair began to rise, and I felt the goosebumps over myself. May, 不要干嘛? I asked. I heard the thud, like something fell, and I lifted my head up to the kitchen where I saw what looked like a dark body hunched over something. Then I heard the gagging sound, like someone was having a hard time breathing. My hands curled into fists, and I ran into the kitchen, flipping the lights on. The fridge door was wide open, but nothing else was in the room with me. And that was when I felt the peck of my cheek from a pair of wet lips.
I wonder where are you now? Wonder where are you now? Wonder where are you now? Would you know my name? Would you know it and did you feel the same? Wonder where are you now? Wonder where are you now? It's too late now, 'cause I'm growing old, but I need you to deal with my sorrow. Just a memory, just a broken frame, and I know that I have no one else to blame. Did you make it? Did you break free? Did you manage to...
Ge, May was dead. Her throat had been slit, and her eyes were wide open, still trying to tell a tale that no one knew. My heart hadn't been the same since I found out about everything from Dee and Ge to May being murdered. Right now, I didn't feel safe. I didn't trust anyone in the house, especially Ge. He had a darkness in his eyes that made him ready to take life, any life that threatened him. Sitting inside the bedroom with my head hung low, I couldn't grasp what I'd encountered since arriving to this place. Was this a bad luck cursed home? And why did Thai trust us to leave us alone here when May had already been murdered? I ran through my head once more the incident leading to Dee finding May's body, and nothing seemed out of place, putting everyone and everything I knew right back at square one. Dee and Ge, together. I knew Ge had feelings for her, but I never suspected he would take it this far. And I never once stopped to think May had secretly loved him too. I was betrayed from friends I knew since a child. Now it seemed as if everything I thought I knew was a lie. How could things ever go back to being normal? I heard a sound from outside the room, and I walked to open the door just as Ge rushed inside, shoving me to the ground. He slammed the door shut and turned around with wide open eyes that frightened me. "What yana?" I asked. He said out of breath. I stood up and shoved my hands through my hair. He shook his head and raised his hands in surrender. I laughed as I pulled my duffel bag out to begin packing my clothes. He grabbed my shoulders and shoved me. I rolled my eyes and threw my hands up in the air, walking around him to pull open the door. I walked out to the quiet living room and kitchen, where the fridge door was left wide open. Walking over, I slammed it shut, and then I heard what sounded like a gasp behind me. Turning around, I noticed that the light on the front porch was flickering, and then suddenly it died, and the entire house went dark. "Ya!" I called out. "The灯上!" I began reaching out my hands, feeling my way back to the room Ya was in. I tripped over something in the dark and landed flat on my face as I turned myself back on the ground and groaned. Opening my eyes toward the black ceiling, I heard what sounded like feet shuffling toward me. "Ya! Tao! Baku shao shao!" As I reached up my hand, I saw long black hair bend down to cover me, and a wet liquid began dripping on my face. I froze. My entire heartbeat just stopped for a split second as I noticed the pair of dark eyes that seemed inhuman staring at me. I smelled the rawness of blood all around me, and then the giggle was heard. I let out a scream and scrambled to my feet as the lights turned on, and both Ya and Dee came out to find me covered in blood. "Otyana!" Dee cried as she ran to me, taking my hands. "Otyaka only no!" "Bakwo! Bakwo! That's your Ya looked annoyed as he replied, "Nay, nay, nay, it's a gaijin zhengguo." "Mogalu satong la kuhu taisha," Dee said as she reached her hand out to Ya. When he turned it on and gave it to her, he lost grip and she caught it with her hand, causing the camera app to take a photo. The flash exploded light into our faces as we recovered from the brightness. But when Dee had the phone in her hands and turned it around, she looked up with a frightening glare. "La, ne shai da do na shai," and she turned the phone toward us, showing us the photo that had captured us earlier. Behind the three of us was a dark figure with long black hair and a grayish-blue face wearing exactly the outfit May had on when we found her dead this morning. Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 4 will be out shortly.
오늘의 날씨 일기예보는 맑음 햇살 밝은 오후 무작정 어딘가를 향하는 발걸음 너와 자주 걷던 거리 어쩌면 너무 익숙해져 버린 습관과 같던 매일 너랑 기억에 갇혀 살아 하염없이 비가 내려 두 뼘 위로 이렇게 맑은데 차라리 빗물이라고 불러대면 마음 편할 텐데 그래 나도 언젠간 너처럼 다 잊을 게 처음부터 우린 없었던 일 하염없이 비가 내려 두 뼘 위로 우연히 다 다른 너와 내 favorite cafe 커피 향에 사랑을 하고 사랑을 받았었던 추억들이 피어오르네 그림자 없이 날 비추는 태양 그 아래 우산 없이 그냥 흠뻑 잡고 있어 Rain Yeah 하염없이 비가 내려 두 뼘 위로 이렇게 맑은데 차라리 빗물이라고 불러대면 마음 편할 텐데 그래 나도 언젠간 너처럼 다 잊을 게 처음부터 우린 없었던 일 환하게 웃을게 비가 그치면 남김없이 쏟아내리면 남김없이 쏟아내리면 잊을 수 있을걸 지울 수 있을걸 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 오늘의 날씨 일기예보는 맑음 햇살 밝은 오후